So we will see how we use modifiers to model. So the bevel modifier, essentially what it does is it takes an object and creates essentially a bevel cutout like so. And you can see how I can really make it closer to round. I think I did it in partly in the table exercise. And if I introduce more segments, I will go closer to having this as a rounded object. Remove it, go back to the cube, add modifier, generate a Boolean. We also saw it in interior architecture to create a window. Let's try a build actually, which is actually fascinating. And you'll see that my cube disappears and you're like, oh, what happened there? But actually, I have created an animation of all of the faces being built gradually. And it's not as exciting unless I actually go in and subdivide everything. I think that can be used for textiles as well, to make them appear like they are being assembled out of thin air. So I get a really nice animation from 0 to 100. And I can obviously change frame start and length. Go back in my subdivision, change this. Decimate actually removes detail out of my geometry. That's a very, again, to understand it, you need to subdivide first. Actually, let me use it later. So I'll take my cube back to where it was. And I will actually go back to the skin. And what happens there is that it creates essentially it treats the wireframe as a skeleton and creates essentially a frame. Now, the good thing with this is that you can actually start building much more complex kind of structures as such. Let me go back. Close skin. Solidify gives me thickness to objects, which you will realize once I go and change the thickness here to 0.25. So I could start essentially really having things that, even though I'm only extruding one direction, I can have a wall. And the most exciting one in terms of modeling is subdivision surface, which essentially models a very nice curvy object out of my modeling cage. So what I can do there is actually start modeling things that are non-planar. I've introduced a So if I want to create, for example, a really fascinating canopy of an object, all I could do is start with the subdivision surface, add a solidify, so it has some thickness. And like so, I could start create extreme avant-garde versions of architecture, which elsewhere are difficult to produce. And of course, I could actually go into maybe creating a second one there, deleting the solidify and adding a skin. And that way I get also the kind of structural skeleton of how this object operates. So have it try have it below. So what happens is we can actually model very complex things by playing with the modifiers as a kind of stack. So you get the data and then you change it by adding to it. Okay? So any kind of curvy object, best way to model it is through subsurface, subdivision surface. Any kind of repeated wave with a wave. And you can also do incredible stuff with the array modifier to model things that are repeated. And after consolidation week, when you should start actually your main exercise, yeah. You should actually start thinking how I can use the modifiers to do a lot of the work, have the computer do a lot of the work that you would be doing by repetitively modeling. Are there any questions?